Hey everyone, Reaper here again with another collection video. Sort of. It's more of a comic collecting history video. Part 2, Year 2, 1994. I've been looking forward to making this one in particular. The first one was fun to do. Going back to 1993 and seeing how I got into comics and reliving that and showing off a couple of books that I got from back then. It was interesting to do, and I think I have another interesting video up to show all of you. I picked out a couple of books that I will show at the appropriate time whenever I get to that part of the story. But I like 93. I got a ton of books, but I'm not going to show them all. Just going to show some of the ones that I was able to grab and some of the ones that were very significant. Okay, so last we left off with my comic history, 1993 came to a close with my father getting me the Amazing Spider-Man 300 on Thursday, December 30th, 1993. I'm usually very good with dates, and that's why I'm able to remember those things so vividly. Photographic memory. Most of the time, at least. So that's how 1993 closed, and we entered 1994, so I started calling it Year 2. Because it really was my second year of collecting, and it turned out to be an even better year for me. Better than the first, when some of my tastes started to change and some of the things that I wanted to get started to change. So I think that goes without saying with a lot of people that get into any sort of hobby. Sometimes your tastes change over time. Some of us start out as key issue collectors, then some of us graduate to maybe cover collectors. Some of us may start only collecting variants or other things like that. Or runs. We're trying to finish runs. So I went through the same thing as my comic collecting continued. So I will every now and then look at this piece of paper because there's a lot to cover. But before I get into what the next big thing for me was in getting comics in 1994, there's some things that I forgot in 1993 that carried over into Year 2. One of which was when I started my sophomore year in high school in September of 1993, we had a student teacher. He was doing his internship from Kane University. And for that semester, from September to December, he was sitting in the classroom. It was an English class. Sitting in the English class, observing, learning how to teach a class, because that's what he would have to do in his second semester, the final semester of his internship. So he was a nice guy, and I would talk to him and so forth, and I forgot how it came up, but I mentioned that I started collecting comics, or I collected comics or whatever, and he's like, "Oh wow, really? I just started collecting." Now he was 23 at the time. He's like, "Oh, I just started collecting." He's like, "Oh, I'll bring some in." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." And he brought in this short box. I don't remember when. It was probably most likely immediately after. He brought in this short box, and he's going through it, showing me all the books that he was able to get. And he was really excited about these books. Okay? He's really excited about these books, the future of these books, and so forth. And I'm looking at them, and I see 3 or 4 copies of Cable #1, 3 or 4 copies of Venom Lethal Protector #1, many different copies of that X-Men, the Chris Claremont, Jim Lee X-Men #1 that sold like 1 billion copies back in 91. A ton of those, not just because they had multiple covers, but he had like a ton of each cover. And I'm like, "Oh, wow. You collect a lot of #1s." And he's like, yeah, man, these things are going to be worth so much money in the future." And I said to myself, no, they're not. The reason why I said that to myself is I remember reading the Wizard magazine. Now, Gilbert, I forgot to mention this from 1993, the first video. Gilbert, that first batch of books that he got me, remember when I talked about those? He threw in a Wizard magazine. And he said, these are good to read every month because it tells you what books are coming out, what hot books. And it has like a little quasi price guide at the end of it. And it's, pretty interesting. So I was reading Wizard. I used to get that every month religiously for a few years, ever since Gilbert gave me that first issue. So anyway, I remember reading in Wizard, I forget what issue, that there were fears in the market, comic book marketplace, that there was going to be a crash because there were so many #1 issues coming out and people were buying them and trying to resell them or hold on to them thinking that they were going to be worth a lot of money. And I remember something in the article saying something, they were mass produced and are not going to produce the results that a lot of investors are thinking. And I bit my tongue, but I remember I was saying to myself, oh shit, this is going to be, I don't think he's going to get what he's looking for. But anyway, that's just a little story from 1993 that I forgot to share that continued into 1994. He was a student teacher. In January 94, he took over the class, and he was pretty good. And what happened to him was he went to become a full-time teacher right after graduation. I remember he became a full-time teacher where I went to elementary school. And I talked with him a few times over the years, and the last time I saw him was in 2002. And I went to the classroom and talked with him, and we had a nice conversation. And I remember back then I used to do my own little drawings. And he says, "Oh, can I have some of those?" This was back in '93. I was like, "Yeah, sure." And in 2002, he brought those drawings back and showed me. He says, "I kept them all these years." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that's really cool." And holding it and saying to myself, "Wow, the last time I held this was back in October '93, almost 10 years ago." So it was really interesting, and that was pretty cool. So that's my little story about the student teacher who became a full-time teacher, but got into the hobby because of investment. That's, once again, though, that's another video. So, 94, got an amazing, 93 ended with the Amazing Spider-Man number 300, so where do I go from there? Well, you could say that I was sort of bitten by the bug with collecting bigger books. So I said to myself in January that year that I wanted to get a big book, and I had 4 books in mind. And I knew I had to take money out of my savings account, which wasn't that much. I didn't have that much. It's not like, I had this massive college fund or, an inheritance or anything like that. I had like a couple $100 that, was put into the account over the years. Maybe somebody gave me like $25 for a birthday gift and, a little bit of money for my, Christmas or whatever. My parents would put it in the account, and I always knew I had it there. So I said, I'm going to take about, I think, $150. I was going to take $150 out, I said to myself, because I thought that was a good amount. And at the next con, which would have been in February for me, or which one I was going to be able to go, I'm going to get a big book. Now, some of you know this story, but let's give you a little bit more of a backstory about it. So, I used to read Wizard magazine, and that was my go-to book to see where cons were. And this one right here, Wizard number 31. This was the book that I used to find the con for February that I was going to go to, where I was going to purchase my first big book with the $150 that I took out of my savings account that my mother took out sort of begrudgingly, but did it anyway. So, I'm in the Wizard magazine, they have all these little funny articles and articles about comics. One in particular, before I get to the point of me showing you this book here, they would show new figures coming out, action figures, and I thought that was always cool. And flipping through this, I remember I remember reading this article about Erik Larsen, one of the founders of Image. And I remember this quote just like yesterday. When I went back to this book and read it, I'm like, wow, I remember this just like it was yesterday. Erik Larsen said back in this issue, Marvel and DC put out hundreds of titles a month. Do I think those books are a whole lot better written than Image books? Not at all, not even close. I always remember that comment. I thought it was kind of stupid. I mean, yeah, I can understand maybe Batman and the X-Men are not as cool as the Savage Dragon, but, whatever. So I get it to the end of the book. I know you're getting a glare, so you really can't see anything too well. But this is where they would show all the cons. Now look at all those cons. Now you may not be able to read all this, right? But you can see all the listings under New York for the end of January all the way to February, and New Jersey and so forth. Some states hardly had anything, but New York and New Jersey had a ton. So the next big one that I wanted to go to was February 12th in Woodbridge. Comic Book Convention, Sheraton Hotel, 515 Route 1 South. Admission $3, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And they even had the phone number. And I said, that's going to be the con that I look for my next big book. So a couple of days, not really like a day or two before the con, we got hit with a major snowstorm. And I remember calling that number to make sure that the con was still going to be going on because, maybe I just remember differently, but back in those days when we got a snowstorm, it was a snowstorm. It was like really, it was a lot of snow. So I feared that con wasn't going to happen, or at least my mother feared. She didn't want to start driving because I didn't have a license or a permit or anything like that. But I called. They said, no, there are going to be guys out there shoveling, and we're still going on with it. So we went. Went there with my $150, and I narrowed it down to 4 books that I would like to get. Amazing Spider-Man 14, Incredible Hulk 181, Iron Fist 14, and Amazing Spider-Man 129. As you could tell, I was an X-Man and a Spider-Man fan. So as I got there, I said to myself, well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford an Amazing Spider-Man 14 for the $150. Yeah, I'd be able to get one, but I don't know if it's going to be something really, really nice. I remember back then, $150 could probably get you, I really don't remember. But I was so positive that it wouldn't be a nice looking book. So I said, the hell with it. Won't be getting that one. I said, with $150, I could get probably near mint condition, or even better, Iron Fist 14, because that was only going for about 110 back then. High grade. Okay, that's a possibility. First appearance of Sabretooth, maybe. The Incredible Hulk 181. $150 back then could get you a really nice grade, maybe a 7.0 back then, 7.5. That might be a possibility. And then I said, The Amazing Spider-Man 129. That could get me a really good grade with $150. So I entered the place, and it was dead because, the snow. I mean, it wasn't snowing, but I guess a lot of people weren't really turning out. So I walked around once. I started from the right, and I walked all the way around. And I really don't remember too well what books I saw on the walls. I mean, there were some, but obviously I just kept moving until I got to the very last vendor space. This older man, I don't know why, but I want to say I remember him with a cigar in his mouth, but that doesn't make any sense. I don't think you could smoke a cigar in those hotel rooms with comic books around. It just doesn't make any sense. But I guess maybe because he looked like the type that would, be gnarling on a big cigar. He had like the little, cabbie hat on and all that stuff. So there on the wall, I saw the book that I thought that I wanted to get. I said, "How much for that?" He said, $150. I just handed it right over. I didn't bother to think about it. I just handed it over. He rolled it up. He counted it. He nodded at me, 150, and he handed me the book. And here it is. I went with The Amazing Spider-Man 121. Now, probably a lot of you already knew that already, but those are just some of the little details with the Wizard magazine and all that stuff that led up to this. And I didn't know really too much about this book. I didn't know there was a Marvel stamp in it or anything like that. I didn't know those things. Fortunately, everything is complete. The Marvel stamp is in there. It's a high-grade copy, I think. I mean, it has a couple blemishes, but nothing. I don't see any color-breaking creases on this. I mean, it's in really good shape. But this was my first big book that I bought with my own money, well, money I saved over the years, $150. And I thought that that was a lot of money back then. And, but I did it. I knew if I wanted something special, that's what I had to do. And I did it. And I remember I was so proud of this book. I'm like, yeah, my Spider-Man collection's really, really blossoming. And I remember taking it to school to show that one guy that was in my class that, was into comics. And, he liked it, of course. And he's like, oh, wow, that's so cool. He was a big Marvel fan. And I was a Marvel fan, too, more or less. Originally an EC fan, but, EC wasn't putting anything out except for those reprints made by other publishers. So, yeah, that's the story of how I got that book and how I narrowed it down. But I still had in my mind those 3 other books. The Amazing 14, the Iron Fist 14, and the Incredible Hulk 181. I still wanted those. And having spent $150 made me want to get those books even more. Now, I've noticed, now maybe some of you have not, once you go past a certain limit on what you spend, and that's just in anything, not just comics, if you say, oh, my limit on a comic book is $100 or $50, I think though once you spend over $100 or $50 or whatever your limit is that you set in your mind, it becomes much easier to do it again and again and again. And that sort of started to happen with me, even though I wasn't in a financial position to do so. I managed to do it another way. It managed to get some more money. But I've noticed it was easier because when I took that $150 out for the Punisher, it was hard to do because I'm like, wow, this is a lot of money. This isn't a $30 book or a $50 book, which I thought was so expensive, like that Venom, $45. That's crazy. This is now $150. And in order to get those other books that you want, or at least in a nice shape, which I wanted, it was going to cost a hell of a lot more. But I found it started to become easier to spend more. I don't know if anybody else has that same experience when you go over what your limit is. But so as the months turned on, a lot of different things, I got a couple more books. I remember in March of that year, the Crow movie came out, and I heard it was such a good movie. I didn't go see it in the movie theater, but I heard it was really good. And I remember a year earlier, Brandon Lee was shot. I was really into grunge music. If you ever go back and you say, well, what type of music did you like growing up, like in high school and all that stuff? Did you like R&B? Did you like rock? Did you like whatever? Me, I was into grunge music. I love Nirvana. I loved that Seattle scene that was going on in the early 90s up into the mid 90s, like with Pearl Jam and all those great bands. I wish I could have lived in Seattle. That's how much I really loved that scene. And it was just really around this time, a little off to comics. This was really like the blossoming days of the Generation X people. I'm part of the Generation X. I'm probably the late Generation X generation. But it was all over the place in music and in movies. Like Reality Bites came out. I remember Singles came out like a couple years earlier, these movies that really focused in on a lot of Generation Xers, young Generation Xers in their late teens, mainly early 20s. And I just loved it. That was like the atmosphere that I really, really liked, and movies that I like to watch, and music that I like to listen to. So whenever I see a movie that really focused a lot, it was really like almost a coming of age story of Generation Xers or Generation Xers entering the workforce for the first time in that era, what it was like. I really gravitate to that. So that's what I really liked. But that's what was going on around that time. And I remember in April of that year, a couple months later, Kurt Cobain killed himself. I remember that was in the papers, and it was pretty devastating since I really liked Nirvana, and I remember watching their MTV Unplugged show and all that stuff. Really liked a lot of their stuff, and yeah. But that's just a little bit of a feel of what was going on at that time. When I was collecting books, it was really Generation X in full force, and it was great. was a great time. So as the cons moved on, I went to a couple more cons. I managed to pick up this book here, which was a big book for me. I really liked the Hobgoblin. In some cases, I liked him more than the Green Goblin. But I was very happy to have gotten that. So I know I'm hitting the 20-minute mark. I know I've been rambling on and on. I'm going to try to get through this a little quickly. Let me just check my notes here. Yes, we're moving along. So what was the next big book for me? How was I able to get this next big book? Well, once again, like I was saying earlier, I said it for a reason. Once you spend a certain amount, once you go over a certain amount, it's easier to go over that certain amount again. So I took more money out of my account. This time I took about $190 out. So I wound up, I don't know where I got this guy's number, but he was from Canada. I wound up purchasing a couple of things from him over the next 2 years. He wasn't very pleasant. I don't want to say his name. Maybe some of you might even know who exactly I'm talking about, but he was a big-time collector, seller, that really didn't believe in buying books or selling books after 1976, I think it was, because he felt that those books were overproduced. And really, if you're looking to invest money into a comic book, those books weren't going to be worth that much in time. I mean, there's always exceptions to that, right? But he made a lot of sense, and he used to send out these mail away things, like, a list of all the books that he had and all the various conditions. So I contacted this guy to try to find my next big book. And I wound up having to take about $190 out of my account, all right, to get it. And this was my next big book. Now, this is not the actual one that I bought back in April of 1994. I'll talk a little bit about the original one. This is an upgraded copy, but this was it. I said to myself, I want Wolverine. And I got it. Got it for about $190. It was, I would say, a qualified 5.5. Why is it qualified? Because remember I talked about the Punisher, the Marvel stamp? Well, guess what? The bastard didn't bother to tell me that the Marvel stamp wasn't in it. He told me it was a subscription issue. So maybe a subscription issue, and now that I remember, maybe it wasn't a 5.5, maybe it was a 4.0. Because I think a subscription issue, you could at least get a 4.0. But it looked good. It looked good. I was happy with that. But what I wasn't happy was something was missing. And I didn't have a lot of gall back then to call the guy up and say, you didn't tell me about this. I want my money back. So I wound up keeping it until years later I upgraded it, because that really bothered me that it didn't have that. It was neatly cut out. Don't get me wrong. You'd open up the page and then you would just see a perfectly, perfect square where the stamp was cut out. But the rest of the book was nice. But it just bothered the hell out of me. So I was able to upgrade the Incredible Hulk years later. But that was my next big book. I went to a con again in May, and I picked up my next big book. Now, this is not the original one. I didn't trade it. I sold it years ago to get this one. Interesting story about this one. Went to the con. I had 50 bucks, right? 50 bucks to my name. I said, I'm just going to get a big book. Whatever big book. Yeah. See the trend here that's going on? I want to get a big book. So I was narrowing down on a giant size X-Men #1. It was probably a 3.0, 3.5-ish. He wanted 65. Now, this was towards the end of my time when I was collecting those Marvel trading cards. I had the Spider-Man cards that just came out. And I had some of those Chase cards, the ones that are supposed to be worth more. I had a couple of those in my pocket. I said, I'll give you 50 bucks in these cards. And he looked at them and he smiled and he's like, okay. I think he felt sorry for me because I was so pathetic. Still am. But yeah, that's how I got my giant size X-Men. And I loved it. I loved it. It was low grade, but it was complete. Nothing was missing. Not like with the Incredible Hulk 181, but man, it was great. And I remember shortly after I got it, I had this head cold, and I remember I sneezed on it. I didn't damage it, but I remember I sneezed on it. The mist went on it, so I was like, ooh. I wound up selling it to somebody years later. So I would say that whatever bug or virus was in me, it died on the cover. in the years that followed. So, moving on toward the end of my sophomore year, getting ready for junior year, I went to another con. So I remember I originally said I wanted 4 books at the beginning of the year. I wanted Amazing Spider-Man 129, Incredible Hulk 181, Iron Fist 14, Amazing Spider-Man 14. Well, this is where that crappy Amazing Spider-Man 14 comes in. The one I talked about in my last video that I showed in another video a couple years ago. Well, this is obviously not it. This is the upgrade version. But a lady was, I remember I used to see her at these cons. She was a real nerdy lady. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that's how I remembered her. She was, she had the big, thick bone glasses, and she was definitely a presence whenever I would see her. But I remember she was selling Amazing Spider-Man 14, that really, really ratty-looking copy, for $50. And I just said, will you take 30? And she said, all right. And I said, thank you. And that's how I got it. Yeah, like I said, it was a real ratty copy, but it was complete. It had extra staples on it. The spine was practically gone, though. The staples on it were keeping the front cover on it. A lot of the front cover where you could see the spine was just gone and all that stuff. But I'm very happy to recently have upgraded that one. So that's 3 that were down. It's almost like, how we come out with our top 10 lists for 2017, 2018. Well, I had my top 4 list of 1994, and 3 were down within the first 6 months. So over the summer, we got to get back to Gilbert. Before that, I remember before that, this is a little side note. Around this time, I was going to start my career. Not really start my career, just begin prepping for it, because my guidance counselor told me I should do this. Begin prepping for my career in mortuary science. So I remember around this time, towards the end of the year, we had one school in New Jersey that taught it, at Mercer County Community College, which still teaches it. I don't know if there are any others. I don't think so. So I had he contacted Mercer and gave them my address, and I remember I got the brochure in the mail. It was like this little pamphlet that was shaped as a sarcophagus, and it said funeral service on the bottom of it. So I remember looking through that, and I contacted a mortician that was his wife was friends with my mother, and that's why I contacted him, and sort of gave me the tour and talked to me, and showed me a couple of things to make sure that I was really, he really wanted to see if I was really interested in this field. So he took me and showed me things that maybe you wouldn't see today, because everybody needs a safe space nowadays, and everyone's offended and everyone's mortified at words and visuals and all that stuff. Back in 1994, getting back to the era of 1994, that shit wasn't going on. People didn't need safe spaces for every little goddamn thing, and people weren't offended or traumatized because they saw certain things. Maybe of course there are people that were, and maybe should have had a safe space back then, no doubt. I'm not saying that, because things were certainly different, maybe not necessarily for the better, but I think on the whole, things were slightly better because people weren't easily offended, and people really didn't, try to destroy you because they saw something offensive. The point is that, he sort of showed me some things that legally I don't think you're supposed to show anybody. And I loved it. You weren't going to get rid of me that easy. So I remember that was another event that was going on toward the end of the year, and it was fun. But as the summer started, I went to go see Gilbert again. I talked with him briefly over the year, and didn't really get too much from him anymore because I was going to the cons, and I started going to cons, and his store really didn't have too much for me anymore. But I remember I went to go see him, and it was nice to see him again. He's like, "Hey, how's your collection going? Oh, I see you're into Spider-Man. You were just like me growing up." And I said, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Yeah, I started with X-Men, and I went into Spider-Man like you." And I think he was 28 at this time. And I remember, I remember when I went to go see him the last time I saw him, he was talking to another worker there, another guy that was working at the shop, and he was giving him like relationship advice. And he's like, "Yeah, man, I told you these long distance relationships won't work out." And I'm like, I didn't even know what a long distance relationship was. So that's when I first found out about that. But yeah, it was really cool. But unfortunately, I don't have any big Gilbert story for you. And that was the last time I saw him. Never saw him again, didn't really talk to him ever again. And, hope the best for him. I think, like I said, I think he would be in his early 50s, maybe mid 50s, something like that. So I hope he's doing well. So, right after I saw Gilbert, my father lived in Jersey City when he came over from Europe back in the late 50s. And a lot of his family still lives in Jersey City. So we went to go see his aunt, or aunt, depending on how you pronounce it. So we went to go see her. It was around my birthday, and she, said, "Oh, hey, your birthday's coming up," and she passed me like a $100 bill. I was like, "Wow, that's so cool." And then when I got into the car and I opened, it was folded. I opened it up. It was actually $200. I was like, "Holy shit!" And my father looked at it. He's like, "She gave you that much money?" And I was getting nervous because he might try to take it from me. Because, sometimes he gets a little irrational. And he looked like he was really pissed. And I was like, "Oh, well, I don't know. It's just for my birthday." And he sort of moved away from it. So then I'm in my mind clicking, "Oh, the next big book. August Kahn, here I come." And that's what happened. A high-grade copy of Iron Fist 14. I didn't spend the whole $200 on it, but it certainly made it easier to get. I had of course, I had a decent amount of money left, and I forget what I got. I think I got no, I don't remember what I got. Sorry. Not long after that, something came in the mail for me from my mother got me something. She overheard me talking about something, and she got it for me. And I didn't know she went and got me anything, but I guess my birthday, she did something. And in the mail, she's like, "Oh, you got a package." And I was like, "Oh, really?" "Yeah." And I was like, I opened it, and this was inside it. Incredible Hulk 180. Yeah, she overheard that I wanted a Incredible Hulk 180. This is about a 6.5. And I think it was only like $30 or whatever. She didn't spend a whole lot of money on it. Incredible Hulk 180 was never more expensive than 181, or at least from my memory of collecting. I don't know how it was back in the 70s or in the early 80s. Maybe it was, until full appearances were more sought out. I don't know. But I remember Incredible Hulk 181. And that was an odd thing to me, because I remember the first full appearance, Apocalypse. I was like, but this is not his first appearance, his first full appearance. Just like with Wolverine, this isn't his first appearance, it's his full appearance. Why is this worth more? Wouldn't his first appearance or cameo be more? Nope. Unless you're Darkseid. Figure that one out, right? Yeah, so that's how the summer ended, and, pretty much, my junior year started, and it wasn't really that eventful. Like I said, the student teacher became a full-time teacher that year. Good for him, because those are hard jobs to get, especially right out of school. And he was able to get something really quickly. Started my junior year, and looking forward to getting some more books and so forth. And it was around that time, I think in October of '94, I got New Mutants '98. I'm sorry, I'm just too lazy to go get it. It's like the bottom box of 4 boxes stacked up on top of it. I remember I got that for $8, and I thought I was overpaying because, even though I spent big money on some of these books, I still went to these cons, but not too much. And for $8 out of the 30 that I went there with, it meant I couldn't get as much. So I wound up getting that, and eventually I got a New Mutants '87 that year. So '94 was a really cool year for me when it came to comics, and a lot of things changing for me. I got my driver's permit, and I remember the guy that taught me how to drive was a nut. Too much to get into for this video. This is a comic book video, and I don't want to spend too much time about my experiences getting my driver's permit with this guy that munch on bagels and lops of food would be all over the place on my arm and all that stuff, and like, ugh. And how he would just like, make everyone nervous that was driving. Maybe some other time. But yeah, a lot of changes that year. A lot of changes, and comic book looks like bigger and better things were yet ahead for me when it came to my comic collection in '95. And some were, but that will be another topic. I'd like to close with a couple of things that I've learned from 1994 in collecting. This was the last year I started collecting cards. I felt that I had purchased, or at least my mother at that time, purchased those Marvel Fleer 1994 cards. It was the inaugural set, and they were $4 a pack. And I said to myself, this is a shame. I felt so bad that my mother got that for me. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm at that time, I'm going to be 16 years old and mommy's buying me things. I said, this shit's got to stop. And it did. And that was when I quit collecting cards cold turkey. It's like, this is a good thing too, because all that shit, all that stuff that you would hear that all cards are going to be worth so much, they ain't worth shit. So that was really the end for card collecting that I started in '92 and just ended by June '94. Probably the biggest thing that I've learned that year was what I mentioned earlier in this video. It was an investor's market at that time, but there was fear that the proverbial bubble, was going to pop, and it sure as hell did a few years later. All those #1s and foil covers that everyone thought was going to make them so much money. I remember Spawn #1 was $25, $20 for a long period of time, and up until about maybe a year ago, you would find those in dollar bins. So the best advice that I could give new collectors watching this, that was able to watch 36 minutes of me, blubbering and all that stuff. I know a lot of you are into some of these artists that are out there that are pumping out really great covers and thinking that you're going to make a killing. I don't think you are. I mean, if you do a quick flip, probably. Long term, I don't think so. But that's going to be another video on variants and other things like that. But just keep in mind that I do believe, touching up on, I do believe, not touching up on, that eventually comic books are not going to be selling for as much as they are now. ETA Nick recently put out a video talking about, some of the things I just said. I think that, like with first appearances like Apocalypse and all that stuff, how people were going nuts for that book, and now look at it. What is it? You get a nice copy for what, $20 maybe? When it was going for what, 60 about 2.5 years ago? Hot books, spec books. I don't know. I'm just sticking with collecting what I like. And you've heard me say that a million times, and you've heard others say it a million times before me. It's just, I don't know. I don't trust it. I have in my mind the next book I'm going to get, and that's what I'm going to get. If it goes up in value, great. If it doesn't go up in value, don't care. That's just the way it is. But, like I said, talking about variants would be another topic altogether. Thank you for watching Year 2, 1994. Sorry if I went on so long. Like I said with the first one, this is a good video to put on in the background while you're doing shit. But thank you for tuning in. Year 3 will be a much shorter video and will be out in November. And I plan to release a couple more videos, obviously, before then and this week. So take care. Thank you for watching, everyone.